The first time Elias Forrester met a Tharnian student, it was in the middle of a field trip gone sideways at the New Mexico Interstellar Zoological Facility, a place that sounded a lot cooler before you found out it was mostly just a glorified desert preserve, with a few alien enclosures and a ticket price that made your wallet cry. Elias had been hired a month ago as a Human Cultural Liaison, which mostly meant walking around with alien exchange students and making sure none of them wandered into a cactus or decided a vending machine was a sacred earth offering. The Tharnian in question was named Verks. Everything about him was long limbs, neck, fingers, and he moved like someone constantly bracing for impact. His skin had the texture and tone of worn bronze, and his eyes gleamed in a way that made people think he was always on the verge of panic. Elias leaned on the railing, overlooking the open habitat labeled Earth Felines Domesticated and Semi-Wild. A few cats lounged in the sun, utterly indifferent to the interstellar audience watching them. Verks stood several feet back, arms rigid at his sides. "You all right?" Elias asked, glancing over. Verks didn't answer immediately. His gaze was locked on a tabby cat that had started cleaning its paw with slow, deliberate licks. "That creature," he said, voice even but strained, "is a predator." Elias blinked. "That one?" He pointed at the tabby, which had now flopped onto its side and was twitching its tail in a lazy S pattern. "That's just a cat. It has retractable claws, forward-facing eyes, carnivorous dentition." "Yeah, cats. We keep them in our homes. They knock stuff off counters and sleep in laundry baskets." Another alien student, a smaller, blue-green creature from the Vitari system named Kel, stepped up beside Verks with a look of open disbelief. "You domesticated these?" Kel asked. "We didn't really domesticate them," Elias admitted. "They just sort of, moved in. We feed them, they ignore us, it works." The tabby stood, stretched with an arched back, and sauntered toward the fence. "It's approaching," he said. Elias stepped forward, crouched, and stuck his fingers through the fence's lower gap. The cat rubbed its head against them, purring audibly. Verks made a sound that was somewhere between a cough and a suppressed alarm. "It's fine," Elias said. "She's just saying hi." "You are touching a predator." Elias glanced back. "You ever pet a predator? It's kind of relaxing." Keln squinted. "And this is safe?" "I mean, occasionally they scratch you, but that's usually your fault." Verks tilted his head. "She is not restrained." "She doesn't need to be." "She's a cat." The cat, evidently bored, sauntered off toward a patch of sunlight and flopped down again. Verks stared after it. Earth is deeply confusing. Elias grinned. "Takes some getting used to." The group moved on, but Verks kept glancing back, as if expecting the cat to transform into a full-sized predator and leap the fence. Elias didn't push it. One strange thing at a time. The next day, the students were scheduled for a tour of the facility's behavioral lab, where earth animals were studied under various stimuli. Elias walked the group through a clean corridor lined with glass observation rooms. Most were empty, but one held a pair of cats, the same tabby from before and a black one with half an ear missing. Verks lingered at the glass. "They are testing the predator's reactions," he said. "Sort of," Elias said. "They're seeing how cats respond to different sound frequencies, nothing invasive." The black cat suddenly lunged at a dangling feather toy. Verks stiffened. "I see is hunting." Elias looked at the cat, who was now chewing the feather like it owed her money. "She's playing. There is no difference." "Well, there is to us. That's a toy, not prey." Verks turned his head slowly. "Your species resides on the same planet as these creatures and does not see the distinction between play and predation?" "We do, just not when it comes to cats. You'll start to get it eventually." "I do not wish to get it." There. Later that week, during a campus free period, Elias found Verks alone in the courtyard, sitting stiffly on a concrete bench. A campus cat gray, long-haired and missing a tail, had claimed the spot beside him. Verks was frozen. Elias walked up slowly. She just wants a warm spot. He approached me unprovoked. Yeah, that's kind of her thing. She was pressing against my leg. She likes you. This is not mutual. Elias crouched beside the bench. You can move her if you want. I fear she will retaliate. Elias reached over and gently scratched the cat behind the ears. She pushed into his hand, purring in a deep, gravelly rhythm. She's just a cat, Elias said again. Verks watched, then, very slowly, as if reaching toward a coiled snake, extended 2 fingers and brushed the cat's back. She flicked her ear, but didn't move. Verks froze. She did not attack. Yeah, you just petted a predator. Verks retracted his hand. I feel alarmingly triumphant. Elias laughed. That's cats for you. The next incident wasn't so funny. 2 weeks later, during an off-site cultural immersion outing in Santa Fe, Elias led the alien students through a residential neighborhood toward a community garden. It was a quiet afternoon, the sun sharp and the air dry. They passed a gate where a large Maine Coon lounged on a brick wall. Kelm pointed. Is that another domesticated predator? Yep, Elias said, though he's more of a neighborhood boss. The cat stood, tail high, and hopped down toward the group. Verk stepped back immediately. This one is larger. Still just a cat. The cat padded toward Elias, paused, and rubbed against his leg. Elias reached down to pet it, and the cat, without warning, bit him. Poor. Oh, damn it! Elias yanked his hand back. Blood welled between his fingers. Kelm chirped in alarm. It attacked! Elias crouched, cradling his hand. Yeah, okay. Sometimes they do that. Verks stepped forward, eyes wide. You are injured. Yeah. Not horribly, but it's deep. Might need stitches. He wrapped a handkerchief around the wound, wincing. Why did it bite you? Verks asked. No idea. Cats are unpredictable. You said they were safe. I said they were cats. Security was called. Elias was taken to the local urgent care, where the physician cleaned the wound, gave him a tetanus booster, and stitched him up. Could have been worse, she said. At least it wasn't a raccoon. Back at the facility, Verks waited outside the med office. You are repaired, he said when Elias emerged, his hand bandaged and stiff. Not a robot, Verks, but yeah, I'll live. You continue to defend the creatures that injure you. They're not doing it out of malice. They're animals. We live with them. We take the risk. Verks was quiet for a long time. You are a strange species. Elias chuckled. Takes one to know one. The next few days passed without incident. Elias kept his hand elevated, took his antibiotics, and avoided petting anything with claws. Verks, meanwhile, became curiously invested in the campus cats, watching them, observing their routines, even sketching one in a notebook he usually reserved for academic notes. Elias noticed, but didn't comment. Then one evening, as the sun dipped behind the buildings and the air turned sharp with fall, Elias found Verks in the quad. One of the campus cats, the tailless gray, was curled up beside him. Verks was gently stroking her fur. She chose to sit beside me, he said, without looking up. Yeah, that means she trusts you. I do not know if I trust her. You don't have to. That's the thing about cats. Trust is optional. Coexistence isn't. Verks nodded slowly, his hand moving in slow, careful strokes. I still do not understand why you live with predators. Elias sat beside him. We don't live with them because they're predictable. We live with them because they remind us of something. What is that? That not everything has to be logical to be worth it. Verks didn't answer, but he didn't stop petting the cat either. The stars came out, one by one, and for a little while no one spoke. It was a little after 4 in the afternoon when Elias returned to the campus lounge, with his bandaged hand still tucked against his chest. The antiseptic smell from the clinic had somehow sunk into the fabric of his hoodie, and now he couldn't stop noticing it. The lounge was quiet. mostly empty except for the Tharnian students at the far table near the wide window. Birks was there, seated rigidly as usual, flanked by two others from his cohort, Meln, who spoke rarely but never missed anything, and Oath, whose neck frill twitched when he got excited, which was often. Birks didn't look up, but Meln blinked once in acknowledgement. Elias dropped into the chair across from them with the same careful exhale he used when sitting after leg day. "I'm cleared," he said. "No nerve damage. The bite missed the tendon by about a centimeter." Oth leaned forward. "They measured the distance between the teeth and your internal fibers?" "Yeah, they did an ultrasound. You know what that is?" Oth nodded, looking faintly impressed. "We use something similar to scan avian lung structures. You allowed them to inject sound into your tissues?" "Didn't really have a choice. They needed to see how deep it went." "You did not react during the scan?" Melon asked. "I reacted plenty," Elias said. "It tickled like hell." That earned a stiff exhale from Virks, which Elias had come to interpret as Tharnian amusement. Or possibly indigestion. Hard to tell. He flexed his fingers gently, testing the stiffness. The swelling had gone down, but the punctures were still sore. He'd been told to avoid lifting anything heavy and to keep it clean, which ruled out most of his usual tasks. "You're still coming to the garden rotation tomorrow," he said after a pause. "We are scheduled to assist in the North Quadrant," Melen confirmed. "They've got a compost issue," Elias added. "Something keeps getting into the bins at night. You'll probably see some local scavengers." Oth raised a hand. "Will there be more felines?" "Not likely. Raccoons, maybe?" Birks's frill flattened against his neck. "Those are the ones with the bandit markings?" "Yeah." "And thumbs." There was a beat of silence. "They have what?" "Thumbs, like us. They can open doors, jars, coolers. One of them once stole a whole taco from me on the train platform. Just snatched it and ran." Meln looked grave. "You did not pursue it?" "I was more stunned than anything. And also kind of impressed." "They are not domesticated?" "Nope. Wild. Opportunistic. Insanely clever. You'll see." The following morning they met at the north end of the garden, an expanse of raised beds, composting barrels, and a small greenhouse that never quite stayed warm enough in winter. The sun was already high, baking the soil and bringing out the smell of mulch and basil. Elias kept his injured hand tucked into a soft brace, using his other to point out the bins. "These two are where the raccoons have been digging in. They figured out how to lift the lids." Birks approached cautiously, inspecting the claw marks along the edge. "They removed the barrier without tools?" "Yep, they're problem solvers, like tiny, furry engineers." Meln tilted his head. "And you have not relocated them?" Elias shrugged. "We try, but they just come back. They remember where the food is." Oth was crouched beside one of the bins, nose twitching. "There's fur here, gray and black, coarse. Probably the big one. We call him Gary." "You assigned it a personal designation?" "Well, he's more of a repeat offender than a stranger." Virks stood abruptly. "You name your pests." "Sometimes. Makes it easier to swear at them." They spent the next 2 hours reinforcing the bin lids with bungee cords and metal latches. Elias mostly supervised, using his good hand to demonstrate how the hooks should align. Melon and Oth worked efficiently, while Virks kept scanning the surrounding fence line as if expecting an ambush. Around noon, Elias stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow with the inside of his elbow. "All right, that should hold them off for a few days. Then they will return," Virk said flatly. "Probably, but we'll adjust again. That's just how it goes." "You do not eliminate them?" "Nope. They are persistent, invasive, and consume your resources." "Yeah, but they're part of the environment. We adapt." Virk stared at him for a long moment. "You redefine threats as tolerable inconveniences." Elias laughed. "That's one way to put it." The following night, just after sunset, the garden's security camera sent an alert to Elias's tablet. Motion detected near bin 3. He grabbed his jacket, only half-zipped it, and jogged the short distance to the garden. By the time he arrived, the others were already there. Verks held a flashlight in one hand and a makeshift pole in the other. Off had climbed halfway onto the compost barrel, trying to peer inside without falling in. "They're back," Elias said, catching his breath. "They've bypassed the new latches," Milen observed, pointing to a neatly removed cord on the ground. Gary the raccoon was perched on the rim of the bin, chewing something with slow, deliberate satisfaction. When the beam of Verk's light hit him, he turned his head and blinked, entirely unfazed. "He's staring at us," Vox said. "Yeah. He's not scared. He knows we're just going to yell." Gary reached into the bin again, pulled out a corn husk, and began shredding it with deft little fingers. "He missed taunting us," Oath said. Elias stepped forward and clapped his hands. "Gary, off the bin!" Gary looked at him, blinked once, and kept chewing. Meln made an incredulous noise. "He is ignoring you." "Yup." Verks advanced with the pole, tapping the ground sharply. Gary finally dropped the husk, climbed down with deliberate slowness, and waddled toward the far fence. Off took a step after him. "He's escaping." "Hema always does," Elias said. Gary reached the fence, climbed halfway up, then paused. He turned back, looked directly at Elias, and chittered softly. Then he disappeared over the top. Verks lowered the pole. He issued a vocalization. "Probably called me something rude." "This is not a sustainable model," Meln said. "It's not supposed to be. It's a truce." The four of them stood in silence for a moment. The garden quiet again except for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. "You seem unconcerned by the failure," Verk said finally. "I'm a little annoyed, but it's not the end of the world. Heem outsmarted you." "Yeah," Elias said, "but I'll outsmart him next time." "He persist in opposition without resentment?" "I think you're confusing frustration with defeat." Verks crossed his arms. "You view adaptation as victory?" "Not always. Sometimes it's just survival. But that's still worth something." They returned to the lounge an hour later, Elias carrying the broken latch with his good hand. The aliens followed in thoughtful silence. At the door, Verks paused. "You do not seek to dominate your environment." "Not always. You coexist with threats." "We do our best." Verks nodded once, slowly. "That is a difficult philosophy." "Yeah," Elias said, "but it's kind of our thing." By the fourth week of the exchange program, the Tharnian students stopped walking in tight formations everywhere they went. They no longer flinched at motion-activated sprinklers or paused in front of automatic doors as if bracing for ritual judgment. There were still moments of hesitation crossing parking lots, deciphering sarcasm, but they'd started nodding at the bus drivers and could now survive a cafeteria lunch without someone issuing a full environmental scan of the tray. Elias sat on a bench near the community greenhouse, his left hand out of the brace but still wrapped in a soft compression bandage. He flexed his fingers slowly, watching the swelling fade to a dull yellow. The bite had healed cleanly, no infection, but the tissue underneath still ached if he gripped anything too tightly. That meant he was off compost duty until the garden coordinator said otherwise. He hadn't argued. Not after last week's mistake, when he tried to lift a watering can and ended up sloshing half of it onto his own shoe. Across the path, Verks and Oath were measuring soil acidity with a clunky digital reader. Oath had found it in the shed and insisted on recalibrating it to match Tharnian mineral standards. The result was a device that now beeped in a melodic scale and announced readings in both English and what sounded like musical Morse code. "It is acceptable," Oath said, waving the reader over a basil bed. The machine chirped like a happy bird. "You just scanned the same spot 4 times, Verk said. "Its acidity has not changed in 12 seconds. I am verifying consistency. You are verifying your own attachment to the chirping." Elias stood and walked over slowly. "That thing sounds like it wants to be a toaster." Oth held it up proudly. "It now expresses satisfaction acoustically when pH levels are optimal." "You gave it emotions?" Not emotions, preferences. Burks didn't look up. He gave it a personality. Elias crouched beside them, bracing himself with his good hand. The basil leaves smelled sharp and sweet, the soil still damp from the morning's irrigation. "So, how's the bed looking?" "Level, stable, and carbon-rich," Oth said. "Though the earthworms appear to be migrating." Elias frowned. "That's not great. Which direction?" "East, toward the kale. They usually don't move unless something's off." He glanced over his shoulder. "Did someone dump citrus in here?" Burks reached into the compost barrel, pulled out a half-rotted orange, and held it away from his body like a contaminated relic. "This smells hostile." "Added do it. Too acidic. We're going to need to rebalance this whole section." Oath nodded. "I will fetch calcium amendments." "I'll get the mulch fork," Elias said, standing carefully. "Unless one of you wants to—" "I will retrieve it," Burks said. "You are still limited." Elias didn't argue. His hand still ached if he twisted it wrong, and he'd already fumbled a jar of olives that morning. Watching it bounce off the counter and shatter on the floor had been enough of a reminder. Burks returned a minute later with the fork balanced over one shoulder. He handed it off to Oath without ceremony, then crouched beside the bed and began turning the top layer of soil with deliberate, even strokes. "You know," Elias said, watching, "you're getting good at this." Burks didn't look up. It is pattern recognition. "Still, you've come a long way from flinching at house cats." "I did not flinch." "You flinched so hard you took 2 steps back into a ficus." Burks paused. "The ficus was not structurally sound." Elias laughed, then winced as the motion pulled something in his wrist. Burks noticed, "You are still experiencing discomfort." "Yeah. Takes time to heal properly. Tendons are stubborn." Oth looked up from the compost bin. "You have a high pain tolerance." "Not really. I just don't like making a fuss." "You allow injury to persist without complaint." "I mean, I follow instructions, mostly." "You did not vocalize distress when the predator bit you." "I did," Elias said. "You just didn't recognize the vocabulary." "What did you say?" "I believe it was something like, 'Ah, damn it,' followed by several words I'm not supposed to say in front of students." O tilted his head. "Those were expressions of injury?" "These were expressions of surprise, pain, and frustration all bundled into one." Burks placed the fork aside. "You used vocalizations intended for social defiance as a response to physical trauma." "Yeah," Elias said. "It's how we cope." Off sat back on his heels. "Your species processes injury through language repurposing." "That's one way to put it." Burks wiped his hands on a towel. "So you do not require medical triage to begin recovery." "We do, but complaining doesn't speed things up." Oth tapped his chin. "And yet, you seek no compensation." "For what?" "For being bitten during a cultural exchange." Elias blinked. "You think I should be reimbursed?" "It was an incident during official duties. Should compensation not follow?" "It's not really how we do it." "I got treatment. I'm fine. And the cat's still roaming the quad like she owns it. No one's pressing charges." Burke stood. "You accepted injury as an occupational hazard." "Not the first time I've been surprised by something sharp. Won't be the last." Oth looked thoughtful. "You maintain equilibrium without justice. We aim for progress, not vengeance." Burks turned toward the greenhouse. "Your adaptability is not logical." "Thanks." That was not a compliment. Still taking it. They worked for another hour, aerating the soil and neutralizing the citrus overload. Elias kept to the sidelines, offering advice and occasionally lifting lightweight bags of mulch with his uninjured arm. Oth sang a short Tharnian work chant under his breath, which sounded like a flute played underwater, while Burks adjusted the bed's border stones for symmetry. By mid-afternoon, the basil had stopped wilting and the worms had begun to return. Elias spotted one near the topsoil and pointed it out. "See that? That's a good sign." Oth leaned in. It is re-establishing territory. They'll stabilize the bed from below, bounce it out. Verk straightened. So even the smallest organisms contribute to environmental restoration. Exactly. You don't need to be big to make a difference. Oth nodded. I will include this in my report. But I'll report. My behavioral analysis of Earth's ecological interdependence. You're writing a thesis on worms. On the resilience of terrestrial biological systems under chaotic stewardship? Yes. Elias shook his head, smiling. Glad we could help. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden, the air cooled, and the smell of compost gave way to damp earth and drying leaves. Elias leaned against the greenhouse doorframe, watching the students pack up their tools. Birks approached, holding out a sealed bottle of water. Hydration. Thanks. Elias took it, twisting the cap off slowly. You know, you're not half bad at this whole Earth integration thing. I am still evaluating. Fair, but you're doing better than most. Verks looked at the horizon. I still do not understand your tolerance for unpredictability. It's not tolerance, Elias said. It's practice. You treat chaos as routine. We don't have a choice. Our whole species is built on improvisation. And injury. Sometimes that too. Verks was quiet for a moment. There is something admirable in your refusal to yield, Elias smiled. That sounded dangerously close to another compliment. I'm still evaluating. The greenhouse door clicked shut behind them as the rest of the students filtered out, chatting softly in their native rhythms. The garden was quiet again, the beds freshly turned, the bins latched, the soil breathing. Elias flexed his hand once more. It still ached, but less than yesterday. Progress. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just another small thing made better.